Right, the football team of the year is out. Just run through it first. So Stephen Cluxton in goals, he was always a dead cert. Michael Fitzsimons, I think he had to be. Great games pretty much every single day. Did a great job in Clifford the first day, especially when Dublin were down to 14 men, and obviously Johnny Cooper had a tough time, so he was solid the whole time. Just in general, like as years go on, he gets better, and who really scores that much off him? Obviously, Clifford got a couple the second day, but I'm not sure Fitzy could have done anything about them. Ronan McNamee, now I know it's a case of picking six backs in any position, but it seems like they did want to go for a straight up fullback here, and Ronan McNamee, I mean, there was no other outstanding fullback as far as I can think of, so they've appeared to pick a fullback here. Tom O'Sullivan, I think just by virtue of closing out Peter Hart in that All-Ireland semi-final against Tyrone, he was always going to get it, and I seem to remember some of his big runs against Cork in the Munster final. Patrick Durkin, I mean, on any other year, if Mayo weren't beaten so heavily for a finish in the All-Ireland semi-final, maybe he would have been in Footballer of the Year discussion. So he kept Ryan McHugh, Shane Walsh and Jack McCaffrey scoreless and kicked 8 points. So, I mean, that's fairly outrageous. So we don't really need to say a whole lot more about Patrick Durkin. Brian Howard, now here's the big one. Brian Howard, who was nominated as a forward, is picked in the back line. And like, if you're a player who has worked so hard your whole life and all this kind of stuff, and you're in the shout for an All-Star, and they're very, very hard won, I mean, it's just kind of making a mockery of the whole thing, I would see. And like, first of all, the All-Star committee have changed it so that they don't have to pick guys in their positions or in their lines. Now it's just six backs. Whereas now you might as well just get rid of forward, back, midfielder altogether and just pick the best 15 players and end up with 15 forwards if that's what you end up with that way. So Brian Howard moving into the backs. I would be pretty annoyed if I was a back. You know, Colin Boyle there, he had a pretty good season. James McCarthy, very good season. So, and I know there's this thing of, like, the All-Star committee will say, well, you know, we had to pick the better players and what have you, and it shouldn't really necessarily matter the position. But I mean, what's the point in the first place? So yeah, a bit of a finger in the eye. Jack McCaffrey, the other wing back, man of the match in the draw and final. Injury then obviously in the replay, just brilliant as always. Obviously had a tough day against Paddy Durcan, but other than that, there's a reason he was nominated for Footballer of the Year. Midfield then, Brian Fenton and David Moran. Probably not a whole lot of competition for those two lads in midfield, unless you wanted to put Brian Howard in there, of course. But it was probably always going to be these two. David Moran probably in Footballer of the Year territory up until the replay, and maybe, I think, even harsh and all as it is, just losing possession or kicking away possession towards the end of the drawn All-Ireland final, maybe it counted against him. So then the forward line, Paul Mannion, Sean O'Shea, Michael Murphy, David Clifford, Cathal McShane and Conor O'Callaghan. So 28 points for Mannion. Probably not too many people gonna give out about that. Really brilliant player, and we even saw in the Dublin final when Crokes lost him in the first half how much that affected him. Sean O'Shea, joint top scorer in the championship, just brilliant game after brilliant game. Don't think anyone would have too many issues there. Michael Murphy, when one of these players who's obviously brilliant and has been for so long, but when he plays pretty well, everyone calls him a legend. So it's one of those things, has a good season, he's guaranteed an All-Star because there's so much media weight behind him. And I'm still saying he's brilliant. But I just wonder, like, how can Ciaran Kilkenny not be in this team? I mean, that replay, the replay of the All-Ireland final, it was a display for the ages, just absolutely unbelievable. I know people find it a little bit boring the way he kind of recycles the ball and whatever, but that's doing precisely what's asked of it. So, I don't know, I just find it absolutely amazing. So, Stephen O'Brien, he doesn't get an All-Star either, and there was one stage when he was in Footballer of the Year territory, and I think in the replay, because he didn't hand pass the ball across to Paul Ganey for a goal that probably, I'm pretty sure, would have led to an equaliser at that stage, and went for the shot straight at Cluxton instead, that probably cost him maybe an All-Ireland, I'd say almost certainly an All-Star, and possibly if Kerry had to win and he had to do a little bit more even as the match was going on, maybe even Footballer of the Year. So that's kind of the fine margins. David Clifford was always going to be an All-Star. Cathal McShane, very, very good season. Really good target man. And Conor O'Callaghan, also, like Jack McCaffrey, nominated for Footballer of the Year. Brilliant in so many games. Lee Keegan obviously tends to blot most people out when he's given a man-marking job. Couldn't do it against Con. Paul Ganey, I think, was kind of hard done by. Just really, really good in so many games. And even towards the end of the drawn All-Ireland final, a couple of, like, when you'd imagine people are out on their feet, and he pressurised a couple of guys just in unbelievable sort of circumstances to sort of spoil scoring situations. So, yeah, really, really great year for him, but Clifford, McShane and Con O'Callaghan are in there. And I'd say there is an element of, we'll get a bit of variety of a few different counties in there. I don't know, I think Gainey possibly ahead of Cathal McShane. I know Tyrone people wouldn't be happy with that, but yeah, just when you're rejigging the team around too. I mean, actually, it's kind of amazing that Ciaran Kilkenny isn't even in the top 7 forwards, despite that performance, because Howard, a forward, is picked and moved into the back line. So that's kind of where you're at with that. And for people wondering, the way it worked out now is that all the people on the All Star committee, they sit down together, they cast all their votes in an email, it's put on a spreadsheet, and then they're kind of totted up so you get a fair idea of where everyone is. So I'd imagine what happened in this situation is that Howard got a huge amount of votes, along with a lot of the other forwards, and maybe some of the backs. It was very, very spread out, and people weren't being voted for as strongly. So they said, okay, the only way to do this fairly is to go with the guys who got the most votes, which is to put Howard in the backs then, because he's kind of probably the most versatile of them all. Played an awful lot of that drawing game against Kerry in the back line, if I remember correctly. So I'm sure that's why they did it. Is it the right thing to do? Not as far as I'm concerned, because it's kind of making a mockery of the positions at this point. So just to run through the team again: Cluxton, Fitzsimons, McNamee, Thomas Sullivan, Durkin, Howard, McCaffrey, Fenton, Moran, Mannion O'Shea, Murphy, Clifford, McShane and Con O'Callaghan. And I'm going to pick my own team, because people always say, well, put your money in where your mouth is. What team would you pick? So I'll start with Stephen Cluxton in goals, Michael Fitzsimons, Ronan McNamee, Tom O'Sullivan, Patrick Durkin, James McCarthy in at centre back, Jack McCaffrey, Brian Fenton, David Moore. So not a huge change up to that point. I keep Paul Mannion, Sean O'Shea, Brian Howard in for Michael Murphy, David Clifford, Ciaran Kilkenny in instead of Cathal McShane and Con O'Callaghan. So it's kind of look like it's a very heavy Dublin team at that stage, which I understand, and maybe that's something that they're trying to avoid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it would have been 9 on my team, whereas the All-Star team that's been announced is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I mean, maybe it's a little bit something to do with that some players lose out just by virtue of the fact that there's too many dubs in there already. So let us know what you think your All-Star team is. Just put it in the comments underneath and let me know what you think.